All right, let's unpack this. Imagine a passionate romance colliding head-on with a massive drug empire and a sinister plot to silence witnesses.
Yeah.
This definitely isn't your typical love story, the kind with a neat, happy ending.
No, not at all. It's fascinating, though, how seemingly ordinary desires, maybe wanting something special, can get tangled up with, well, extraordinary criminal activity.
Right. And lead to really devastating outcomes.
Exactly. This case, it really makes you think about the complexities of human motivation.
Absolutely. So at the center of this incredible story, we have Charlotte Lindstrom. She's a young woman who left Sweden looking for something more, something special maybe. And Steven Navarro, a much older guy, like 18 years older, deeply involved in Australia's drug scene.
It's such a stark illustration, isn't it? How appearances can be, well, profoundly misleading.
Totally. And how easily you can get caught up in situations way beyond what you first imagined. So our deep dive today, it comes from this really compelling narrative. It's built on police investigations, court records, media reports, spanning, what, 7 years?
7 years, yeah. And it's got everything. Love letters, secret recordings, dramatic arrests, serious jail time.
And ultimately, this really shocking betrayal.
It really does highlight the meticulous work investigators do, piecing together all these fragments to get to the bigger picture, the truth.
Yeah. So our mission today is basically to navigate this intricate web, pull out the crucial stuff, the key insights into what happened, and importantly, why, without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Right. Connect those aha moments.
Exactly. Where that initial romance suddenly takes this sharp turn into, well, serious crime and real danger.
And what's really striking is the transformation you see in the people involved. As the story unfolds, our initial ideas about them get, well, seriously challenged.
Okay, so let's rewind. Back to the beginning. The start of this pretty unlikely relationship. Charlotte Lindstrom. Young woman, middle-class background, Stockholm, Sweden. Her parents later said, she didn't really have a specific career goal, but this strong desire to feel special.
Yeah, that desire to be special. It's common, right? But it can sometimes make people vulnerable.
Vulnerable how?
Well, vulnerable to the allure of things or people that promise that feeling, even if it comes with, huge risks or ethical compromises.
Makes sense. So at 19, she moves to Australia with some friends, looking for that spark maybe.
Perhaps looking for something.
Fast forward, Sydney. Charlotte gets a job working the door at a gentleman's club. And guess who owns it?
Steven Navarro.
Yep. And the age gap, 18 years. Pretty significant.
Yeah, and relationships with that kind of age difference, they often have complex power dynamics going on.
Which could definitely influence how things develop, the choices people make.
Absolutely. A crucial factor.
And their relationship, it moved fast, like really fast. Charlotte developed these expensive tastes, designer labels.
And Steven was happy to pay for it all.
Totally. Within just a few months, they're living together. Fancy waterfront place in Sydney.
That quick escalation, plus the financial dependence, it really sets the stage for potential problems down the line. Imbalances, complications.
For sure. Okay, so 2 years into this seemingly glamorous romance, things take a dramatic turn.
The turning point.
Steven pops up on the police radar, but not through, like, a drug bust or anything obvious. It was a really weird phone call to the fire brigade.
Right, reporting a fire at a property in Riverstone, out west of Sydney.
Yeah, but then he claims his secretary called by mistake. Super suspicious.
It really is. That seemingly small thing, that odd call, it's the thread that starts to unravel this huge criminal operation. Shows how even little inconsistencies can flag you to law enforcement.
And it gets weirder. The fire brigade says, look, we still have to check it out. So Steven actually tries to stage a small fake fire outside.
To deter them.
Seriously. But it didn't work. The crew arrived, saw no real fire, but did find something Steven really didn't want found. A massive, incredibly sophisticated ecstasy lab.
And when you say massive, I mean, even seasoned drug squad officers were reportedly stunned by the size.
Yeah.
That tells you something.
Oh, yeah. The police footage is pretty nuts. They found these 3 enormous stainless steel vessels, like 300 liters each.
Huge.
A staggering 780-liter vessel, too. And multiple 250-liter beer kegs, all modified with condensers, actively distilling stuff.
To put that in perspective, a typical clandestine lab might use, what, 20-liter flasks?
Yeah.
This was industrial, full-on chemical plant level.
Exactly. And that wasn't all. Upstairs, they find electric blankets covered in, get this, 6 kilograms of pure MDMA powder just lying there.
Wow, just out in the open.
Yeah. Plus, bags full of drugs, 3 industrial kill presses. One was still loaded with powder, ready to go. It wasn't just a lab, it was a factory.
The electric blankets.
Yeah.
Probably for drying the MDMA powder, right?
Right.
And the presses are the final step. Tablets ready for the street. It shows a really organized, efficient setup.
The final tally from just this one place, 40 kilograms of pure ecstasy.
40 kilos.
Estimated street value around $127 million.
Astonishing amount of money.
The lead detective said he doubted he'd ever see a lab that big again. Took the police 2 whole days just to catalog and haul everything out.
That value just underlines the massive profits in drug trafficking. And the huge motivation behind it.
And amidst all this gear and chemicals, investigators found a couple of things that seemed small at the time but became critical later. A pair of men's Louis Vuitton shoes and a gas mask.
Interesting. Often it's those little details, isn't it? The seemingly minor things that end up providing the crucial link, connecting someone to the scene.
Exactly. So, next step. Connect this industrial scale lab back to Steven. They found the lease for the Riverstone place was under a fake name, John Walker. Fake address, too.
Standard tactic to try and cover tracks, using aliases, false documents. But as we'll see, it doesn't always work out.
Nope. Acting on a tip, investigators started suspecting John Walker was actually Steven Navarro. So for the next year, detectives worked hard building the case.
Listening to his calls, watching him and Charlotte.
Right. And they traced that sophisticated lab equipment back to the company that made it.
Shows real persistence by the police, gathering all that evidence needed to make the case stick.
And here's a detail that's almost funny if it wasn't so serious. Several workers at the machinery factory clearly remembered selling all that specific large-scale gear.
To a guy calling himself John Matthews.
Yep. And get this, he bought so much stuff from them, he ended up on their company Christmas card list.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly shows the sheer volume of equipment he bought left quite an impression.
You could say that. So these factory workers, they become absolutely key witnesses, ready to identify Steven.
Right. Crucial testimony.
Armed with that, police get a warrant to search Steven's apartment in inner Sydney, the place he shared with Charlotte.
The net is definitely tightening now. Evidence is piling up.
The police footage of that search, it shows Charlotte answering the door. And she seems surprisingly calm, confident even. As the officers are explaining they have a warrant.
Steven wasn't there.
No, he was away on a fishing trip.
Her calmness at that point. It's really interesting, especially thinking about what happens later. Was she genuinely clueless or just putting on a really good act?
Hard to say. One detective later commented she seemed totally sure they wouldn't find anything linking Steven, but they did.
Oh.
Under the TV cabinet, a Louboutin shoebox, men's shoes size 9.
Size 9? Like the Louis Vuitton shoe found at the lab?
Exactly. Same size. It wasn't even something they were specifically hunting for in the apartment at that moment, just an unexpected but massive piece of the puzzle.
Wow. That's a direct link back to Riverstone.
Yep. So even though they didn't find direct proof of his aliases in the apartment right then, the eyewitness ID from the machinery guys was enough. They arrested Steven when he got back from fishing.
Did he resist?
He actually tried to negotiate. Called the arresting officer, suggested they just meet for coffee instead of him coming down to the station.
Seriously, trying to downplay it like that. It suggests maybe he couldn't believe it was happening, or maybe just a habit of trying to manipulate things.
Maybe. But the story takes a much, much darker turn while Steven's in custody.
How so?
Another prisoner comes forward with really disturbing information.
What kind of information?
That there was a plot, a plan to harm the 2 key witnesses from the machinery company.
The ones who could identify Steven.
The very same. And this alleged hit was being organized by 2 guys from Victoria, supposedly on Steven's orders.
Wow. From drug manufacturing to conspiracy to murder, that's a huge escalation.
Huge and deeply concerning. Shows a willingness to go to extreme lengths, right, to protect the operation.
Absolutely. Did they have proof?
The informant mentioned they even had a rough mud map of the factory layout. Just a basic hand-drawn sketch, you know?
Mud map. Okay.
So police immediately put the machinery company under close surveillance. And incredibly,
What happened?
a car, Victorian plates, pulls up right outside the factory just as it's closing for the day.
Just like the informant said.
Exactly. And shortly after, someone inside the company gets a suspicious phone call, asking about the 2 intended victims by name.
And were they there?
No. When the caller was told they weren't there, they just hung up. Abruptly.
Chilling. That sequence of events really backs up the prisoner's story. Suggests a real immediate threat.
Definitely. Meanwhile, Police are monitoring Steven's calls from jail to Charlotte.
Were they talking openly?
No, using coded language, which made it hard at first to figure out exactly what they were planning. But investigators did figure out Charlotte was actively meeting with one of the potential hitmen.
So she was involved, actively involved.
It seems so. The coded language shows they knew they might be listened to, right? But it wasn't clever enough to hide everything. Then the plan seemed to change. Charlotte started looking for someone else to do the hit.
A new hitman. Why?
Not entirely clear, but the original Victorian guys were paid $100,000. Then $70,000 of that was refunded.
A partial refund.
Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe she lost confidence in them, or they backed out.
Could be. Suggest maybe a breakdown in trust, or perhaps she decided they weren't right for the job, so she looked for an alternative.
Okay, so the plot was still active.
Very much so. And the crucial breakthrough came from one of those recorded calls.
What did she say?
She explicitly stated her intention to have the witnesses killed, using this really chilling phrase. She said, "in the cemetery."
Wow. In the cemetery. No ambiguity there.
None. Investigators were reportedly shocked just how direct she was, her apparent willingness to, commit such a violent act.
That statement, it really highlights the transformation she'd undergone, from socialite to this. And the investigators' shock just underscores how serious it was.
So with that damning evidence, police had enough. They arrested Charlotte in Sydney CBD.
And her parents back in Sweden.
Completely unaware, had no idea about the horror unfolding over here.
What a contrast. Young woman moves to Australia for a new life, ends up facing charges for organizing a murder plot. Just staggering.
While she was in custody, police searched Steven's jail cell thoroughly. Found photos of Charlotte, handwritten notes.
Anything linking him directly to the plot.
Nothing explicit in the cell, it seems. But they also searched Charlotte's apartment again. And this time, they found more linking Steven to the drug lab.
Like what?
A book. It had the fake company name K&M Engineering written inside, plus a phone number and a date. All pieces connecting back to the Riverstone lab setup.
More threads tying him directly to the operation.
Yeah. And in a really tragic twist, they also found a letter written by Steven to Charlotte before his arrest.
What did it say?
Expressing his deep desire for them to have a perfect life together.
Oh, wow. The irony. Given everything they were involved in, it's just heartbreaking in a way.
Totally. It really highlights the shattered dreams, the huge gap between what they wanted and the reality of their choices.
So Charlotte's arrested, facing serious time for the murder plot. What happens next?
She makes a pivotal decision. Facing potentially decades in prison, she agrees to cooperate fully with the police against Steven.
In exchange for a lighter sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A reduced sentence. This was a massive turning point for the prosecution.
That betrayal from inside the relationship, that must have been devastating for him, but crucial for the police.
Absolutely crucial. Charlotte then led police to other places where Steven had run drug labs, clandestine locations, and she gave key testimony, detailing exactly how he was involved.
So her cooperation was vital.
Immensely. And on top of that, powerful new DNA evidence surfaced.
The shoes and the mask.
You got it. Steven's DNA was found on that Louis Vuitton shoe from the Riverstone lab.
The size 9.
The size 9. And they found traces of ecstasy residue on the filters inside the gas mask. DNA evidence, it's often seen as the gold standard in forensics. Pretty hard to refute.
That provides undeniable scientific proof. He was there.
Yeah.
He was involved in making the drugs.
Exactly. So the legal outcomes, it's complex. Steven ultimately pleaded guilty to the large-scale drug manufacturing charge.
And the sentence.
Substantial. Over 16 years in prison.
And Charlotte.
She pleaded guilty to organizing the contract killing.
But what about the conspiracy to murder charge for Steven and the Victorian guys?
That's where it gets interesting. They were actually found not guilty on that specific charge.
Not guilty. Why?
Conspiracy charges can be really hard to prove. You need to show a clear agreement, a definite intention between everyone involved to commit that specific crime. Apparently, the evidence didn't meet that high legal bar for the jury.
Right. Highlights the complexities of the legal system. Different verdicts for related actions.
For sure. Charlotte, during her court appearances, was apparently very emotional, kept saying she'd been manipulated by Steven.
Did people believe her?
Hard to know. Apparently, she even got smuggled notes from Steven while she was in jail, but she refused to read them.
Wow. So she cut ties completely.
Seems like it. Ultimately, she served 3 years in prison. Then she was released and went back to Sweden.
3 years for organizing a murder plot.
Hmm.
Seems relatively light, given the potential sentence. Her cooperation clearly paid off.
It certainly did. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaways are pretty stark, aren't they?
Definitely. We've seen how a relationship, maybe starting like any other, can spiral down into extreme crime. This tangled mess of love, betrayal, and ultimately violence.
All driven by individual choices and the really severe consequences that follow.
And what's really striking is Charlotte's journey, her transformation, from this young woman wanting something special to being involved in planning a murder.
And then becoming the key witness against the man she loved.
Exactly. And you can't overlook the impact of that hard evidence, the DNA, especially, and her cooperation. That's what really brought down a major drug operation.
So for you, listening, this extraordinary story, it really makes us think, doesn't it? How easily people can get caught up in things way over their heads.
It prompts you to reflect on, well, the true nature of relationships.
Yeah.
And the critical importance of being really aware of the paths we choose.
Which leads to a final thought, a provocative question maybe. In our own lives, what are the subtle ways, the seemingly small compromises, or maybe desires, that could potentially lead us down paths we never expected, paths that might even be dangerous?
Yeah. Is love truly blind? Or, does it sometimes just choose to ignore what's right there in plain sight?
Good question. Something to definitely mull over as you think about everything we've explored in this deep dive.